right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to White Collar Week, and this is our Tuesday night speaker series. Tonight, we have a very special presentation. We have our Fairness and Restitution Town Hall that was brought to us by our own Tanya Pierce, and she's going to do the introductions in a little while. I'm Jeff Grant, and I am the host tonight and the executive director of Progressive Prison Ministries. And on Monday nights, we run a white collar support group on Zoom. And if you'd like more information about that, it's on our website, prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist, and you'll get all the information you need there, including how to reach us. So the only announcement we want to make tonight is that on December 12th is our next Tuesday night speaker, and that will be Miriam Baer, who is the Vice Dean of Brooklyn Law School, and she just wrote a book recently called Myths and Misunderstandings in White Collar Crime. Fascinating book. I'm not going to talk about it a lot right now. Just let you know that that's going to be on December 12th, and if you'd like to join us, you can find the link on our website, prisons.org, or join our mailing list, and we'll be sending you all kinds of information. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Tanya Pierce. And Tanya, you can do the introductions. And when the presentation is done, when the panel is done, Tanya will turn it over to me. And then if you would like to ask any questions, because we will have a Q&A, or you'd like to to share your experience, you certainly can. And we're going to do that by putting your names in chat. So please don't raise hands, put your name in chat so that we can get a list going. And you can ask questions of our panelists or share your experience or anything you'd like to do. So Tanya, the meeting is yours. You're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you this evening for coming to the monthly series of, the White Collar series. Tonight, Fairness and Restitution Act. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Tanya Pierce. I have been in real estate for over 25 years. I own and operate a portfolio for my family. Due to my conviction, I now operate a nonprofit called Life Unbolted, where we look at the disparity for people impacted by the feds returning home. I had the joyous occasion to meet Jeff some years back when I first returned home and found this wonderful white collar support group that has been instrumental in me grounding myself, finding some dignity, self-respect again. So Jeff, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much for what you've done with this group. And I remember when I first started this group, it was group number 294. So I'm excited that you're almost to 400. Thank you so much again. Tonight, I just want to I have an esteemed panelist with me. I have Dr. Topeka Sam here. She is the co-founder of Ladies of Hope Ministry. She is the one who sponsors us from this campaign. I have Elise Roper, who is also the chairwoman of the RemissionNow campaign, a dear sister from Illinois. I won't say Chicago because they taught me to say Illinois because not everyone is from Chicago. And I have Roxane Jackson, who's also from Illinois. And I just want to say that I love them dearly. And those ladies know how to throw a Christmas party. I had the opportunity to share their Christmas party with them last year in Illinois. But I stayed in Chicago with some other sisters as well. And I also have my dear, dear sister and friend, Cassandra Cean-Owens here. We not only met in Danbury, but after that experience, we have remained bonded. And I want to thank also Professor Eileen Strauss from Columbia Law School for having her class here with us today. Thank you so much. I'm just going to give like a brief history, a background about restitution. Restitution is intended to be compensatory compensatory, not punitive, component of a defendant's sentence after conviction. Too often, however, the restitution imposed is unfairly onerous, disproportionate to the harm actually caused by the person, and unsupported by evidence. Even after a person has served their prison sentence, many restitution orders make it impossible and very difficult for a person to start their life again, to care for their family and dependents, and to even make the required payments. Many people who have served short sentences, like myself, crimes are burdened for years and even decades later by restitution requirements. Restitution can be, and has, for me in particular, become a life sentence. The Fairness and Restitution Act of 2023 would improve the federal restitution law by ensuring fairness, proportionately and accurate in the amounts of the restitution owed, preventing restitution obligations from becoming onerous and lengthy, and helping victims recover also. And also the statutes that we're going to be looking to amend is for the Columbia Law students is 18 USC 3613B, 18 USC 3664E, 18 USC 3664H, 18 USC 3664, and 18 USC 3572B. Why we want to give the statutes is because it's important for everyone on this to know that this is not about relitigating your case. This is not about anything except restitution and fairness across the board. Now, I want to first introduce Elise Roper, my dear, very dear sister. I don't know if words can express how I feel about Elise since the time that I've met her, but I'm gonna ask her to share with you how we got here today.
Oh, you don't want us to introduce ourselves first, Tanya?
You can introduce yourself.
Okay, just to give them a little background. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff, for having us, and thank you, Tanya, for bringing this to the forefront. I am Elise Roper. Actually, I am from Chicago. I'm actually wearing a shirt that says "Straight Out of Chicago," so I am very proud. Having been reared and raised in Chicago, I don't live in Chicago now. I'm in a suburb, but I am from Chicago. In my previous life, I was a managing partner for a small minority law firm here in Chicago. My areas of practice were primarily transactional. I did a lot of estate planning, probate, and real estate law. I was convicted in 2015 for mail fraud and served 9 months in Lexington, Kentucky. And I currently have a restitution of, I guess it's at least 5 million. I don't know, with interest and everything, it's probably a whole lot more. And currently I work as an operations manager for a consulting firm here in Chicago. I'm very blessed to have an employer who believes in second chances. So before I get into the history, I'm going to just let everybody else introduce themselves. So I'll turn it over to Roxane.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Jeff, for opening up this floor to us to talk about this very important subject. I'm Roxane Jackson from Illinois. And I had a bridge up before to represent the bridge that we all cross in life. And so in 2015, I too served a period of 17 months in federal prison. And I have a restitution of 1 million. And like Elise said, with interest and everything, there's no telling what it is now. But restitution is particularly onerous. Once you've served your time, you don't realize that there is life after that. And when you agree to these crazy restitution amounts that really don't reflect what happened, it just causes a very serious problem on the other side. And that's what we hope to do today, to educate you about restitution. And so that attorneys who practice law, who really don't understand the impact of restitution on their clients, the goal that they understand and learn so that you can adequately protect your clients in the next chapters of their lives. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Cassandra.
Well, Jeff, thank you for having us. Tanya, thank you for those warm introductions. And I know we already gave a shout out to the Columbia crew, but I have to give a shout out again. Hi, Eileen. She's like the best law professor I have ever met. So I know your students are blessed to have you. Hence, that's why they're here, because you're so great. With that being said, I am also a lawyer. And when I was an attorney, I was a managing partner of a general practice. I was in 2015 sent to Danbury Prison after being convicted of wire fraud. And my sentence included 87 months of incarceration, a $1.2 million restitution judgment, and 3 years federal supervision. But somehow I found out about some of my rights under the restitution law. And I was afforded a mandatory Victim Restitution Act after the Court of Appeals remanded my case. And then my restitution was reduced from $1.2 million to $247 something. But thank you for clapping, Jeff. But it was a large feat because, many cases are never overturned, even in part. And for me, that was almost a lottery winning. It constituted a lottery for me. Is $1 million that I didn't owe, that I knew I didn't owe, but somehow it was imputed upon me. So I really believe that I was lucky, I was blessed. But unfortunately, when I walked into prison and 2 weeks later, I was leaving for my MVRA, I found out that almost nobody else knew what a mandatory Victim Restitution Act is. And that's why we're here tonight.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I'm going to now revert back to Elise and said, how did we get here today?
All right, let me unmute. So back in 2021, right after Biden was elected, I reached out. I was doing some research because several of my sisters, including Roxane and a couple of our other justice impacted sisters here in Chicago, were just trying to figure out how to get out of this restitution. And before I go further, how many people on this call have restitution? Okay, quite a few. All right. So you all really understand what we're talking about here. And so it was just we just felt kind of just despondent because there seemed to be no way out of this. So I had been doing some research, ran across Topeka and her ministry with the Ladies of Hope, and reached out to her. And she was gracious enough to respond back. And through a series of meetings, she decided that she would help us with our costs. She actually flew out to Chicago to meet us in, I believe it was April of 2021. We did a Facebook Live on restitution. And I had invited my criminal defense attorney to participate. And during that session, he actually mentioned that there was a way to get rid of restitution called remission. None of us had ever heard of that. I don't know why he didn't tell me about that, since he was my attorney. But at that moment, it was like, okay, great. So we did some deeper dives, and through a series of divine appointments, we actually, so let me go back just a minute. Remission is a form of clemency, okay? It is very rarely used. I believe it's been, and the ladies can help me with this, I think it has only been used maybe what, 30 times or so since 1930. So it's, nobody really knows about it. I believe the last president that actually did institute it was Trump. We know several women who had large restitutions. I think he did 2 remissions. And so it is there. In any respect, we decided that we were going to start trying to figure out a way to get rid of the remission, restitution. But we also needed to figure out a way to make the restitution laws fairer, because right now, the government can throw up a number, whether it's real or not, and that's what you're stuck with. And so we wanted to find a way to resolve that, as well as some other issues that are that go along with having restitution. So we kind of had 2 trains running at the same time. On the remission front, we actually were able to get in front of the pardon attorney. She was at an event that we had. We shared our stories. She asked us to come and share those stories with her team. So we did that last August. And as a result of that, the pardon attorneys has added remission as a way of getting rid of, as a form of clemency on her website. So we are still waiting on the president to grant us our remissions, but we have at least started to get that information out so people are aware of what remission is. On the other front, in regards to the legislation, Topeka put us in touch with the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the NACDL, and they also agreed to help us with legislation that would change the statutes that Tanya mentioned earlier. And so as a result of that, I believe about 2 months ago, they had finished their draft. And so that is what we're going to discuss with you tonight. We are in the process of trying to get the word out. A lot of people do not know about restitution, as far as the effects of restitution, understand how it impacts people. Lawyers, judges really don't understand. I have a friend who's a federal prosecutor in Washington. And when I told her what we were dealing with as far as restitution, she had no idea. So if I have somebody who's in the federal system that doesn't understand how restitution acts, you know how the rest of the world views it. So that is why we're here today, to talk about why we need this act and how it can impact those of us who are affected by restitution.
Okay, so my first question is going to be to Topeka. Would you like to say anything?
Well, one, thank you everyone for joining tonight. Really, thank you, Jeff, for allowing us the opportunity to be on this platform to share some of the work that these incredible, brilliant sisters are leading. I just am behind the scenes on this one here, supporting them and, you know, their mission and vision. I was not charged or incarcerated for, you know, having a white collar crime or restitution. And so therefore, I did not feel it deemed appropriate for me to lead this work. I am a person that creates platforms for people to use their voice to share their experiences. And this is a prime example of one of them. I'm grateful that God led me to these sisters to help to, you know, elevate this cause. I have learned a tremendous deal from everyone here and continue to learn. So I just want to thank you. I'm not going to take up any more time, but excited to hear and learn and just gain all of your support for everyone's here and get the word out, because the legislation that we will be proposing will help everyone. You know, it's non-gender specific, but it will help anyone who is struggling with this life sentence. So thank you.
Thank you, Topeka. Thank you. Our first question goes to Roxane. How has restitution impacted your life?
You know, when I was going through my journey, the goal was just, you know, I'm remorseful, I'm sorry, I just want to get on. I want to get on with it. And so I was willing to accept whatever they said to make this happen. And all the lawyers said was, you don't have to worry about if it's $100 million. Nobody ever pays restitution. And so I said, well, fine, then I'll accept $1 million. I just want to move on. What I didn't realize was that when I began to live my life again, that I was burdened with this number in every aspect of my life. When it came to applying for a home, it comes up on your credit report. When it comes up to applying for credit, it shows up, you know, and you don't get credit. Sometimes banks will turn you down from opening up accounts, because that restitution number is tremendously scary. But see, we don't know that when we're going through this. And so our goal today is to make sure that anybody who's facing this with a potential restitution, you've got to advocate for your rights, because there is life as a second part of your sentencing. The second thing is, you know, attorneys, they don't understand restitution fully. And so they may not advocate for their clients to get the lowest amount of restitution. We've got to change the narrative and change the mindset of attorneys, not to say, oh, don't worry, you'll never pay for it. But you know what? I better think about my client's life after prison, because he or she will be saddled with this restitution. So this is really a learning forum. And for those students that are thinking about practicing federal criminal law, please take that into consideration. It's more than just a sentence. Restitution is a life sentence.
Thank you, Roxane. Thank you. Collateral consequences. That's what we live with. Elise, the same question.
Well, I may have been given a 15-month sentence, but I am still in prison. It's not a physical prison, but it is a financial prison. White collar criminals, I don't understand society treating us the way they do, and you have murderers who can get out and start all over again. But with white collar criminals, it's a different thing. So it has impacted my life, similar to what Roxane just stated. I've had credit cards closed on me because they did a background check. I've had bank accounts closed on me. I can't do stocks. Basically, financially, your life stops. I mean, you have to really depend on other people to do things for you that you used to be able to do prior to pleading guilty. And so, you know, again, it is a life sentence. And like Roxane, I had no clue, even though I am an attorney, I did not dabble in the criminal arena. So I really had no clue as to what I was getting into. I just thought I would, you know, serve my sentence and be done with it. But I am still in prison today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Cassandra, how has restitution impacted your life?
Well, restitution has impacted every aspect of my life. As I
Wait,
said,
wait, I should back up. How is it? Because you're still on supervised release.
yes.
So you're not a has, you're a is.
And just being on supervised release is like having 1 foot in prison and 1 foot out of prison. Being on supervised release with restitution is like having 1 foot in prison and a foot out of prison on a banana peel. That's how slippery it is and dangerous. And I just even want to back up from the time I was sentenced, restitution started affecting me. Because when I received a letter in the mail after my sentencing, the first letter I received from the court was a letter that had every piece of property that they levied the restitution amount of $1.2 million on. I was shocked to see that some of the homes and houses that were on this piece of paper that was levied or encumbered by my restitution, I didn't even own. These were homes that my parents owned, homes that my husband owned, but just because I had some nexus to the property, they put a restitution on it. At that point, I was just too weak to fight. I said, I have to get back to this. One thing that individuals may not know who are not affected by this, and I'm so happy that you're not, when you're at this stage, you feel like you're fighting for your life. So you're at a point where you have to prioritize. Restitution, you don't realize, should be one of the things on top of your priority. Because like I said, before I even got to prison, it affected me. When I got to prison, again, it affected me. I was there for 4 years. As I told you, I had MVRA very early on, but it was later than I should have gotten it. So they had to take me out of prison and bring me back for it. So because of my restitution, I had to be shackled and transported and go to court to fight for myself. And as I said, the sisters in there didn't understand what restitution was. Matter of fact, they didn't even believe me when I said I'm going back to court. They said, nobody goes back to court in 2 weeks. You must be 60 days in. We know about that show. And I said, no, I'm really going to fight for my case. And so I get there. And the judge himself could not believe what he was hearing. In fact, after my first hearing, the judge looked at the prosecutors and said, who committed the fraud here? And at that point, it was deemed all of the individuals who testified against me in court were not even victims. So it's so easy for anybody who is a criminal defendant to be assessed with a restitution that they honestly do not owe. And people don't understand that. So while I was in prison, waiting for 4 years for my entire sentence to be resentenced, or to be resentenced, I should say, there were liberties I weren't afforded. So even in prison, you have those who are incarcerated and you have those who are incarcerated who owe restitution. There were privileges even though I did everything right. Not one infraction. I was at a camp. So when you're at a camp, you're allowed to go out on passes. Here was the time I waited for, my daughter's kindergarten graduation. I did everything I was told to do so I can get a pass to go to my daughter's graduation. The counselor said, I'm sorry, we can't even let you apply. I says, what do you mean? She says, I didn't realize you had $1.2 million of restitution, and you would be considered a danger to society if we let you out. I said, to go to a kindergarten graduation? She said, yes. And the thing is, at the point, I didn't even owe, it was deemed that my restitution wasn't $1.2 million. So that's before I even got out of prison. Now, I'm on home confinement, get off home confinement, and what happens? The day after home confinement, I'm told I have to pay $1,300 a month in restitution. So at that point, I'm like, well, you might as well left me with a $1.2 million restitution because you treated me just as bad with a $247,000 restitution. So what did I have to do? I had to work 2 full-time jobs. Thank goodness I have 2 professions. I work both as a nurse and a paralegal in order so I could make sure my restitutions were covered and I didn't go back to prison and I could pay for my expenses. So restitution impacted me in a big way. And what a lot of people don't understand, and this includes practitioners, is there's no escaping restitution. And my sister said it very eloquently. They said it's a second sentence. You see, your first sentence, even if you have letters after your term of imprisonment, LIFE, you can even escape that. And they call that on your death certificate, escape by death. There's no escaping restitution. Even when you die, your heirs will have to pay for your restitution with anything that you leave. There's no escaping this. It's definitely a life and a sentence after death.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I can speak for myself as well, how restitution has impacted me. When I returned home, my bank accounts were closed, properties were levied, and also I was a person that went to trial. I was convicted after trial. The victims who I was convicted of, the amount of loss was $35,000, but my restitution is $2.5 million, something called relevant conduct. I had no idea what that was. By the time I began to find out what that was, we're talking, I'm home 7 years later from prison, and I hired attorneys to now have something called a quorum nobis. And what I was denied because I should have applied for my restitution in 2014 when I was sentenced. So yes, I lost my right to MVRA hearing. It was waived without my knowledge, without me even knowing about it. So restitution has impacted me for the fact that I had to end up serving my entire supervised release. People normally say, oh, you do right, you're going to get off early. Not with restitution. In fact, I spent 102 months of justice involvement with a 30-month sentence. I was 30 months. I spent 39 months on pretrial, 21 months in Danbury, 5 months on an ankle monitor, 5 months in a halfway house, 2 months on an ankle monitor, and 36 months of supervised release. Restitution. So our next question, we can get into a bunch of things here. We're going to now look and see how the act that we are looking to change, the Fairness and Restitution Act. Just to give you some idea of the act will require that the government show actual loss sustained by a victim as direct and proximate result of defendant's actions, eliminate joint and several liabilities, and ensure that defendants are only responsible for compensating harm that they cause, hold an evidentiary hearing for proving or disproving the amount included in the restitution order. Also, preventing restitution orders from being too lengthy, change the statutory period from 20 years to 10 years, allow the courts to consider the economic circumstances of a defendant so the defendants are not overburdened with unfair, unrealistic burdens, prevent garnishment of wages that would make you too poor to even apply for appointment of counsel, allow defendants to petition the court for change in their restitution order if their economic situations change, allow defendants to keep small amounts of money that they receive outside of the benefits, such as a gift or an inheritance. But the main thing that we're here to say is talk about the victims. We are victim sensitive. We want to make sure that victims are compensated for actual loss. Require that any amount collected by the government first go to the satisfaction of a restitution order where there's cases of restitution and forfeiture as required. And also allow settlements of outstanding restitution orders, which would guarantee an amount of restitution for victims while removing the burden from the defendant. And lastly, exempt any restitution owed from counting as income on income tax for income tax purposes. Now, I want to move back to Elise to ask her, how would this act impact your life?
Well, if passed, I believe it would end my life sentence because currently the statute is 20 years that restitution can be used or billed against you. Sorry, I can't think of the right terminology, but you have 20 years to pay restitution. And even at that point, it can be extended. So under this act, the longest that it could happen would be for 10 years. And so that would be, I felt like I could feel like I could breathe again, that I could get back on with my life after 10 years. This bill would also allow us to settle. So that's another aspect that could be implemented as well. So this gives us some light at the end of the tunnel of getting out of this noose that is around our neck right now.
Roxane, how would this impact your life?
It would give a new meaning to the word a second chance.
Cassandra, how would this act impact your life?
It would impact my life greatly. It would reverse just everything. So although I would still be on federal supervision, but 1 foot in prison and 1 foot out of prison, at least the foot out of prison would no longer be on a banana peel. And that's because in this act, we have something that would eliminate joint and several liability. And you would be held responsible only for the amount of money that you received or approximate to your actions. In my case, it was my attorney fees, simply. My attorney's fees for all the representation was $14,000. I've since paid $14,000 since I've been gone. And this is what really hurts a lot of individuals. And not only would it change my life, but in fact, coming home from work today, an hour before this call, I received a call from one of our sisters that we were in Danbury with. She's about to get off of probation in 2 months. And she called me in a panic and she says, Cassandra, what do I do? I just received a letter from the court saying I must make a payment immediately. And they're asking me for the entire restitution amount. I've been paying every month. What do I do? And so when I saw the letter, I said, okay, calm down, don't worry about it. They're not gonna offset and garnish everything. You just have to enter into a repayment plan. But guess what? She's been trying to call the court since November 6th and has not been able to even get a hold of anybody to make this repayment plan. So if she doesn't get a hold of anyone in 60 days, they literally can just start taking whatever belongs to her. So it would not only change my life, but it would change the lives of thousands of people, Tanya. Just by that very provision.
And also in my case, I've been paying restitution since 2015, and annually I go to the court and get a printout. There has never been a disbursement in my case.
Well, can I?
That's a topic for another day. But just to go to show that these ghost numbers ghost victims that are piled on us with no accountability, and the financial litigation unit, which is known as FLU, being the gatekeeper. This law here would now allow us to go back and settle, to have discussions and get back into court. Currently, we are prevented from going back into court the way these judgments are set up as a one and done. These judgment of convictions are one and done. And that would change. And that's, I believe, in my case, that would be the greatest thing that could possibly happen, is that we have the opportunity to actually have our day in court as it pertains to restitution. Now, our last question before we open up the floor is, we're going to go to you, Elise. What do you wish, or what did you wish you knew during that time that you know now?
I really wish I understood how restitution was going to impact my life. Again, like I said, I thought I just went to prison and it would be over, but I never had any idea of how devastating having a white collar conviction impacts your life. So I wish I knew. That way, I think mentally I would have maybe been prepared and done some things a little differently, knowing than what I know now.
Okay, Roxane, the last question. What do you wish? And I'm so glad that your video worked and you were able to stay with us. Thank you so much.
No problem. Again, as I said earlier, I wish I would have known the impact that restitution would have on the post-imprisonment chapter of my life, and how it would impact me trying to rebuild my life. Had I known what I now know about restitution, I certainly would have thought harder for the real amount of restitution, and I wouldn't have settled just to get through this with any numbers that they threw out to me, because I said, yeah, I'll take that number. I just want this to be over. I would have said, no, the real number is, whatever this is. And so I'm not going to agree to $1 million under the premise that, don't worry about it, you're never going to pay it off, because you are saddled with that every day of your life.
Cassandra, the same question.
Well said, Elise, and well said, Roxane. I wish I knew how long-reaching restitution was and how far-reaching restitution is. And then I wish this not only for myself, but for everybody, that we all knew that we had a right. We had a right to a mandatory Victim Restitution Act. And admittedly, when I was fighting my restitution, I wasn't fighting it because of the money, because I was told, just like many criminal defendants, don't worry about the money. Let's focus on how many years of imprisonment you're going to get. The only reason I fought my restitution the way that I did is because I wanted to prove that the victims in my case really weren't victims. And I almost have nightmares, because even when the case was remanded back to court, my attorney was still trying to settle with the prosecutors. He said, listen, the prosecutors are now going to reduce your restitution to $500,000. I think that's a good deal. Let's take it. Imagine if I would have said, yes, let's take it. And so this happens over and over again. So that's what I wished for myself and everyone else, that we knew, and hopefully now everyone who does know can spread the word. You do, and it's a constant, it's a right by statute. You have a right to this mandatory Victim Restitution Act. And it could it could just do so much for you.
Thank you so much. And of course, me being the fourth leg here, I agree with all of them. Knowledge, understanding, a real second chance. Topeka, I see your hand up.
Yes, they got lower it now.
Yes.
A question about in the chat, just about what is the chance of this legislation passing? And I just wanted to make a comment on that, if that was okay.
Yes.
The chance of this legislation passing is just as good as any other legislation that has passed, I would say. And I say that because from leading campaigns in the past, myself, where we've passed over, I mean, now 12 pieces of legislation nationally, and also was really, really instrumental in the passing of the Federal First Step Act and getting certain provisions added in that legislation. It is all about using your voice, sharing the impact that this particular legislation will have on your life, and leaning in on your elected officials to make sure that they are aligned with the agenda. And so we have already scheduled a few calls with a few senators, actually one this week with Senator Durbin's office. And so we're excited because we know that people are listening to us. One thing I can say is that this particular issue in this way has not been raised. It is unfortunate, and I mentioned earlier, you know, my conviction was a drug crime. And all that I had seen up until this point here was around first-time nonviolent drug offenders. And while I have also, you know, fought to make sure that we're looking at violent crime or people who are convicted of violent crime differently, what I did not consider in some of the, as I said, active legislation that I have been instrumental in supporting and helping to pass, that I did not look at restitution, remission, and, you know, how that has impacted one's life. And so when, you know, we've talked to several people and have gotten a lot of great feedback around it, but the more support that we have, which will require each one of you and each one of your voices, because what I do know about passing legislation is that each of us come from different places, and people relate to each one of us differently. And so while there may be someone who can listen to, you know, Elise in one way and will be moved by the things that she says, there are people who won't, right? And there are people who may hear Jeff and some of the things that Jeff will have to say, but there are people who won't. So that's why diversity in building these campaigns are critical, and how we get legislators to support and want to move it forward. So just again, to close, this campaign is as strong as we make it, and the legislation can pass as long as we are all aligned.
Great. All right, we got a lot of questions, Tanya. So Jeff.
Okay, Jeff, I turn it back over to you. Because Columbia is in class, we want to have them ask their first questions if they're in the queue.
So Professor Strauss, can you please moderate the questions from your class, and you can just say them out loud, and then we'll leave it to the panelists to answer. And then after you're done, we'll go to the names that are in chat. So after the Columbia Law students, we'll go to Bill, Julie, and then Nevin. So Professor Strauss, it's any questions?
Hello. Oh, wait. What do we do now? Okay. I'm so sorry, everybody.
I'll put the headphones.
Yeah.
You want me to
Mute the main one.
We can't hear you.
Okay, you can. All right, beautiful, perfect. I'll tell you, Columbia Law students, why don't you put your questions in chat? And I think.
What I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to mute and listen to everyone. I'm just going to type in the chat if that's okay.
Perfect, perfect. Put them in chat. That's great. All right. Well, while that is happening, why don't we go to Bill's question?
Oh, thank you, Jeff, and Tanya and Dr. Sam and everyone. Thank you. How do you, well, I remember when you first started this campaign, and I remember seeing a video, and it was kind of interesting because I didn't come away with, I have about $5 million worth of restitution, but I recognize over time that my situation is different than a lot of people's, because it, it wasn't really ghost restitution. But as time goes on and I've heard more, I really have come to appreciate where you all are coming from in this, because I've learned a lot with respect to some of these restitution amounts. Mine was pretty cut and dry, and it was direct to one particular individual. So my question though is, what do you see the recent, how have you interpreted the recent court decisions on actual loss? How do you see that impacting your movement and the work that you're doing? And I leave that open to anybody in your group that would like to address it.
Well, the recent, once again, that's the court. And that's what we are looking at, the court having discretion. If we change statute, then everyone will have an opportunity to have an evidentiary hearing and have their restitution. What we're looking to do is not join in several, but that's a great first step. But we're looking for legislative to go all the way, because what one judge will do, another will not do, which we've seen so many times.
And Bill, that's a good question. And honestly, we're so far from having those court cases impact us or the individuals that fall into the category that we're addressing here. And that is because for the actual loss to actually apply to you, you really have to have an MVRA, because if you don't have an MVRA, you will not truly know if it's an actual loss they're calculating or an intended loss or somewhere in between.
Sandra, really quick, can you share what NVRA is? I saw that in the chat as well earlier.
Yes. So MVRA stands for Mandatory Victim Restitution Act. So basically what that means is, once you're sentenced to restitution, as a criminal defendant, you have a right to have the prosecutors and the victims show how much money, dollar for dollar, what you were convicted of caused them. And it's very tricky, because even in that, where they have to prove that it was your actions that caused it, it's very slippery. And I'll just use my case for an example really quick. So the $247,000 wasn't derived out of any closings that I did. It was wire fraud based on a mortgage scheme. This was based on a short sale of a property that I wasn't even a part of. But what the court said is, if that first closing didn't take place, the short sale 5 years later wouldn't take place. So therefore, the difference between the mortgage and the short sale, the $247,000, is what we're saying you owe. Now, my expert witness said, listen, this really is an actual loss or intended loss. They had to hit you with something because you've been in prison now for 2 years. So I appreciate that question, Bill. And I hope that one day it really applies. But before we can get to how the court interprets actual loss, the criminal defendants have to be put in a position for the prosecutors and the victims to prove what actual loss they've suffered and what the restitution amount should be.
Thank
Did I
you.
answer your
That was
question?
that was a really excellent explanation. Thank you.
You're so very
I
welcome.
feel much better about it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Cassandra. Just to be clear, as someone who is a defendant whom restitution is going to be imposed against, you have a right to face the people who are accusing you of having stolen from them, and then the nexus has to be drawn between your behavior and the actual loss. Okay, so there is another concept of intended loss, definitely important, and there's a split in the circuits as to how that's going to be treated. But this is about actual legislation to try to circumvent all of that in the courthouse, so that everyone has to follow the same rules. All right, Devin, are we able to get a question from you? Want to give it another shot?
Jeff, did you say Nevin?
No, Devin.
I am
Devon.
typing it right now.
Devon, go ahead. Go ahead, Devon.
All right, Devon is
They're gonna type in.
Devon,
You can speak. You can speak. We can hear you. It's clear. Columbia.
Okay, is this all right? There's a little
Sure,
bit
go
of
ahead.
That's okay.
Just ask
We'll
your
bear with
question.
but everybody can hear me okay.
Just ask your question, Devon. All right, we're going to go to the next person in line. Julie.
Me. I just want to say thank you, ladies, for just really taking the guilt. So often in my shower, I think of these same things. I was a lawyer and I didn't care at the time of sentencing. I just wanted to get it done. I didn't care who they were adding to my list. I was just going to deal with that later. And so just hearing your stories and how it's affected you, I'm still on home confinement, so I still am at the very kind of beginning of my journey. But I just, it makes me feel better to know that other people have traveled this journey before and they're okay. And I was just wondering, in part of the legislation, is there any aspect of it that would give you any credit for restitution for how many years you served? Because I mean, you are working at your 12 cents an hour job, and they are getting some, it's not equating, it's just not covering your care. I mean, is there anything like that at all as part of that?
Well, let's just make sure we have your question correct, Julie. Are you saying while you're incarcerated, will the time served equate to some amount that you can ask to be used to reduce your restitution?
Right.
That's
just
actually
a thought.
that's a very good thought. And I'll have the rest of the individuals on the panel correct me if I'm wrong, but no, that currently isn't reflected in our in the reform that we're seeking.
Okay, well, I really appreciate all that you're doing and want to help it move forward. I think the joint and several, didn't affect me, but the joint and several is just is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense, and none of it makes any sense. And even being a lawyer, I didn't have anything to do with my restitution hearing. They said I might have one later, but no one came back. I don't understand why that's not part of ineffective counsel, that you can't say, hey, they never came back to me, and even gave me an option of having a hearing. But anyway, you're doing great work. Thank you, and I wish you all the best.
I'm sorry that happened to you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. All right, we're going to go to Devin's question from Columbia. I'll read it out loud. It's a restorative justice question. Do you think there are non-financial ways for defendants and victims to reconcile? Sometimes the emotional impact of the case is more important than the financial. Perhaps this could work to decrease the restitution amount.
Well, the way that the law is set up currently, the government is the custodian for the victim. So we don't have access to the victim. So as far as the restorative justice practice, we can't do it unless we change the law, because the only person that we have to speak with is the government. We are prohibited underneath the victim's witness protection from speaking to the victims when it comes to restitution. So great question. And that's one of the reasons that we're trying so hard with this act to get back into the court so that we could have these types of discussions and open it up. So currently, restorative justice practices would definitely be an option, but we can't.
You saw Devin's response, right? It seems like a fruitful avenue for reform.
Definitely.
Yeah, maybe you want to put it on your list of on your bucket list of things. Next is Nevin, then Keith, then Lee, then Maria.
Thank you, Tanya, and the rest of the panel. I am so grateful for you
Thank
sharing
you,
your
everyone. Sorry for the earlier confusion.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you for sharing your stories and for carrying this burden and this torch to create legislative change. I think that is the only way to enact this change here. I had a question around forfeiture in particular. I think the threat of forfeiture and levying properties that you don't own, taking assets that you didn't think you were saving for retirement, is stress inducing and creates this potentially generational poverty or generational cycle of recidivism because you have no money for your kids. How is that addressed in the legislature? And I'm going to email you afterwards because I want to join and help in whatever way I can, because I think this is so important to creating restorative justice.
Well, I think we're going to share. I just gave the summary, but we're going to share with the group. Jeff and I spoke about it earlier. So you're going to get an email and get the full dossier of what we have drafted so that for time purposes, we wanted to just summarize what we are working on. So you'll definitely get, as far as your question around, it was forfeiture. This right here first deals with restitution, and then forfeiture afterwards. So do you have both, or you?
I would potentially have both, but I guess the question is, would the forfeiture be the 10-year cycle, 10-year time limit as well?
That's what we will be looking at. Yes.
Perfect. I think that's
I have both as well.
Yeah. That's the greatest thing. Great. Thank you so much. I'll email you separately.
Thank you.
Just so everyone understands, restitution and forfeiture are different concepts.
Yeah.
We don't have the time to really parse
Delve
that out tonight, but we do have a video by David Smith, who was a guest of ours a few months ago. And if you'd like more information on some of that, you can find it on our YouTube channel and on our website, prisonist.org. Next is Keith. Keith, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you everybody for this informative information. So the timing was perfect. So yesterday I received a letter from the Southern District of New York regarding my restitution, and that I'm on Social Security right now. I'm not making any other money, and I've been paying what's the minimum, the 10% that they claim, not that they claim, but that the judge instituted at my sentencing. So now they're looking for more money. And the woman I spoke to today reminded me, well, 10% is the minimum. So she sent me, I have to fill out a financial disclosure form, which is no problem. I've done it 3 other times. She claims that no one's seen my last financial disclosure, which was maybe 5 months ago. So the question I have is, with all that you're informing us about, it appears that they could just decide that, they want a larger percentage of my income, whether it's Social Security or whether it's money earned. And I have no idea, as far as the victims are concerned, who actually put in for a claim. We had 7 people, we were told, out of 57 that complained about our company when we were going public. So, what are we supposed to do? I can't afford to hire a lawyer and start, spending money. And I want to be as proactive as possible So how can someone like myself and others get involved with your group to be helpful in some way to the mission, but at the same time help ourselves?
I believe Tanya put in the chat our email address, restitutionreform@gmail. So please send your information. We will definitely reach out to you. And you are one of the people who would be greatly impacted by this act, because we do protect Social Security and other things that the government tries to take away now. They would not be able to take that away through this act. You would also have an opportunity to reach a restitution amount that is fair, that is reasonable, that won't put you in poverty. Because that's what happens now with a lot of people on Social Security or a fixed pension. By the time the government takes their share, you don't have enough to live off of. And that is not what restitution is supposed to be about. So please, what is it? restitutionreform@gmail.com.
Yes. And I've spoken with Tanya personally. She's wonderful. Hi, Tanya. And
Hi, Keith.
how are you? So, and I've said in the past, I do want to participate in some way to help you and your team. So I will write to you and hopefully we can chat.
Well, like Topeka said, you know, your voice, your story, share it. We got to get the legislators behind us on this. Share it with them. If you know people who know people, you know, it's going to be on us to share it and carry the message, because yeah, a lot of people, most people don't have any clue of what we're going through. None.
No, absolutely not.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you so much.
That's also one of the differences between restitution and forfeiture. Happy to talk about it with you anytime. Let's see. The next question is Lee and then Naya.
Hi, thanks so much. You girls are inspirational. As you have, I've been told numerous times that it doesn't matter. They don't, they don't make you pay it. They can't take your husband's money. They can't levy houses that are not in your name. Don't worry. And obviously it's just all to just kind of keep you focused on time instead of this. And I echo the same question that numerous people have had, but then Ivosa wrote in the questions, like, at what point in time should we be asking for this MVRA hearing? And if we've already signed a plea agreement, which 98% of all of us do, because we're just kind of ramrodded and stuck in that corner, is it already too late? I'm just curious about timing, and happy to help and lend my story of really obnoxious ghost numbers in healthcare fraud. We know every insurance only gets paid 10% of the allowable. Well, 90% is our number. I had a business partner. We're both saddled with $40 million in restitution each, with additional forfeiture, twice as much as both of us made. So it's just, it's just snatched out of midair. And
it is.
I just, for 7 years you've been here and everything's okay and it's going to be okay. And then you come on this call and you're like, oh God. So please help me. And yeah, timing would be my question. Thanks again for having me.
Can anyone answer that? Timing? I think Cassandra has firsthand experience.
So,
Cassandra, let me reframe the question. Okay. Were you entitled to this hearing prior to your sentencing?
Thank you for rephrasing it. No. And I should have been. My attorney, he didn't do it. And it wasn't until after I was sentenced and my co-defendant made the motion as part of his appeal that the restitution was incorrect, that I get to go back now for what should have already been done. But what the shocker was, Jeff, was this. I asked my attorney to make that argument and he says no, because the courts frown upon you and you'll get slapped even harder for pointing the finger at the victim. So I respected what my attorney said, but once that argument was made in the Court of Appeals, the government did something surprising. They conceded immediately. They didn't even try to fight the fact that what we claimed to be incorrect was correct. So that led me to believe that they couldn't defend it, that they couldn't defend the $1.2 million restitution. So to answer your question, I should have been afforded the opportunity the same time, before sentencing. I should have been afforded the opportunity before my sentence.
Like any good talk show host, I actually know the answers before I ask the questions. So Lee, that's a fantastic question. I think next Monday night, what we're going to do on our ordinary support group meeting is we're going to talk about this in depth. You're actually entitled to an evidentiary hearing on restitution. Very few lawyers do it. And the courts are not going to. They're not going to do it on their own motion. They're going to only do it if the attorney for the defendant demands it. I think it's mandatory. I don't think they can turn you down. But what the repercussions of that are, there's a lot of nuance in that, because this can be a situation where the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, and you don't want to win on one side of this and lose on the other. So it takes a lot of good lawyering and a lot of good teamwork to make sure that hopefully you can make progress on both. How's that, Cassandra? Does that make sense? Is that encapsulating it?
Very well done. Very well said. And one thing that my attorney did that could have harmed me again, even after the Court of Appeals remanded my case, he was asking a judge for the evidentiary hearing, but he wasn't calling it a mandatory victim restitution hearing. He was calling it a FATICO hearing. And there is a big difference in the fact that a FATICO hearing, which is an evidentiary hearing, the judge could deny. That's something that he can give per discretion, but my attorney should have been asking for MVRA, because once he asks for MVRA, they have to give it to you. But now, if your attorney doesn't ask for it, unfortunately, it's waived. And that's what happened to so many people. They didn't even realize that this right was waived.
So tune in Monday night, and we'll talk about the difference between MVRA and a FATICO hearing too. Okay, and we'll try to knock all of this stuff off next Monday night. Okay, if you want the link to tune in next Monday night, you'll find how to contact us on prisons.org. All right, thank you. Fantastic question, Lee. Thank you. Yes, anyone else?
Yes, before we leave, I just want to, Columbia Law School.
They left.
Professor Strauss, and you saw Devon. I just spoke to them on the phone. They have a very special program called the Paralegal Pathway Program that Tanya and I was both a part of. That program is intended for individuals who are justice impacted, and it actually certifies all of the knowledge that you've gained while you're incarcerated fighting on your case. And it helps you take those transferable skills and now market them. So the program is still accepting applications until Friday. You do have to be you don't have to be in New York. You do have to be a New York resident, excuse me. And it's in person. But if you're in New York, it's a wonderful program.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Cassandra. All right.
That's how Cassandra got her job in policy at the place at the organization she works at, through the PPI Pathways program, I should say. Okay.
Next is Naya, and then Brianne.
Oh, I just wanted to say this is like an amazing conversation. And I guess my question is going to be answered later anyway, but I'm really concerned about forfeiture. And when I think about forfeiture, I'm talking about forfeiture of my state retirement. So I didn't know whether or not the usage of the term forfeiture in the context of tonight is the same.
Anybody, or you want me to slip in there again?
Yeah, I mean, forfeiture of my state retirement is going to happen.
The concepts kind of overlap. Okay.
Okay.
Forfeiting your assets. You could have an asset freeze in the federal system. You could have preliminary forfeiture. That's different than an actual forfeiture order or restitution order. Restitution order is supposed to go to the victims. A forfeiture order goes to the government. The money goes to the government. Okay, so when we're talking about restitution versus forfeiture, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
But Naya, hit me up and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, text me and I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Next is I lost it. Brianne, and then Mary, if you have a question after, let's go to you.
Hi, this may have been slightly addressed, but the reason that we didn't get to fight anything in the restitution, it's my husband's restitution, not my own, was because we were advised that it would be contrary to the acceptance of responsibility and he wouldn't have that 2-point deduction. Is there any language or anything that will protect that right, that he messed up, but not that much? How do they show the judge that, how do you do both sides of that without it being held against you?
Well, in the FIR, the Fairness and Restitution Act that we're speaking about tonight, one of the things is it would make an evidentiary hearing or MVRA hearing, it would make everyone have the right, whether you're taking a plea or whether you went to trial.
Right, but I guess there's no guarantees in life for anything, especially in this system, but
I think we will
that we're still accepting responsibility.
Yes, but what we will look at is actual loss in your proximity to the loss. And then the victim, whoever the victim, he or she or entity it may be, they may say, listen here, you know what, give me $20,000 and let me go my way. But that's what we are prohibited from, having that conversation. And that's what this would do. This would bring that conversation so that parties can talk. You can call it restorative justice, restorative practices, but this would bring all parties to the table so that we all know exactly. They know what they're expecting. We know what we are paying. Instead of having this 20-year life sentence over our heads that can be extended. And then the government being a custodian and not allowing parties to speak. And then the courts not allowing us back into the courts because we took a plea, or people like myself who went to trial, the attorney waived your right, so you lost anyway. It's the same thing at the end of the day. We are trying to get ourselves back into the court, get back with the victims and make amends.
Yeah.
And have our life again. That's it. That's why it's called fairness and restitution. This is not a get out of debt free card or smuggle debt away. No, it's just fairness. Let all parties be able to talk.
It's a great question, Brianne. What you don't want to be is an outlier. You don't want to be the only person asking for it. So then, so that the court thinks that you're not accepting responsibility. So if it's mandatory and everybody has this hearing, then you won't have to worry about that. Yeah. It's not going to happen in our lifetime or in the next. We'll find out. But it's certainly aspirational. It's a wonderful thing to try to do. All right, let's. We have Mary, Linda, and then if we have time, we'll go back to Nevin. Mary, do you have a question? Yes, no? All right, Linda.
Okay, real quick. The victim payment. In my case, the victim is the IRS, and they don't seem to think they should have to apply any payments they get to what was the actual loss on the criminal complaint. would that be included somehow with when we're talking with the new legislation? Would it start to force, for example, credits in case like that to be applied against what they're considering the losses? Because now they're coming after us civilly and saying, oh, well, yeah, but there's all these other debts that, you know, that really don't exist, but we don't want to count your restitution towards the debts that were listed in the criminal complaint.
So Tanya, we're getting a bunch of questions that are like outside the scope of the legislation. And I just want to take the heat off of you a little bit. Linda, that's the kind of thing that should have been clearly delineated in your paperwork in advance, so that it's clear in the plea agreement, it's clear in the sentencing transcript, it's clear that a credit civilly is a credit against your restitution. It should have been clear. A lot of people have that problem.
It was clear. That's the whole point. And now they just say, well, the probation people say, well, we can't tell the victim, quote unquote, how they're supposed to apply their payments.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty slimy, but not a shock.
Well, everyone, it should be clear.
I'm thinking, can I go file? Yeah, go ahead.
In this legislation, we have a provision to go back to court. You can take your claim back to court, whatever your claim is. They said this, they said that, and this is what's happening. There's a provision to go back to court. That's the fairness in it. Go back to court.
And is that something I can do now already?
You cannot. That's why we're here.
Okay.
To have this discussion, because these are the things that we are prevented from doing.
That's what I thought. Okay.
All right, our last question. I guess Nevin has another question, and then we're going to close. Nevin.
Yeah, to wrap it up, Tanya, how can we, with this captive audience, help this campaign and this initiative? I want to get involved. I know everyone on here has a vested interest to get involved. I haven't heard concretely how we can get involved, so please tell me, because I want to be your spear.
Elise, being that she's our chairwoman of the campaign, you want to give our call to action as we close out?
Again, as our esteemed Ms. Dr. Topeka Sam stated, at this stage, we need you to just start sharing your stories with others. Reach out to your legislators, let them know that we have an act that hopefully will be sponsored soon, that we would like for them to support. Let them know the things that you're going through. Again, they don't know the impact of some of the laws that they have enacted. So we need you to just get the words out. The more people who know this, the more, when this act does come out, will hopefully gain traction, and we can get others to join and force with us as well. And again, you can reach out to us at restitutionreform@gmail.com. As we progress with this campaign, we will let you know more and more definitive steps that you can take to help get this legislation passed.
Thank you, Nevin. And Tanya, I want to.
And if you set up something with the legislator and need us, we will definitely be there. We will tag team with you. You're not alone. Let us know, and we're there.
Yeah, and I think we're going to share we have a letter that has been endorsed by both the NACDL and the LOHM that we will share with you, that you can use to meet with different legislators and different spheres of influence that will explain what we're trying to get accomplished here.
Thank you so much, Elise. And Tanya, thank you. And thank you to Elise, Cassandra, Roxane, and of course, the inimitable Topeka K Sam for all being here tonight and leading us through this discussion. It was a wonderful, wonderful evening. Again, reminding everyone that we have a white collar support group that meets on Monday nights. If you'd like to join us, go to prisonist.org and you'll get the information. And on December 12th, we have our Miriam Bear speaking and talking to us about her book, Myths and Misunderstandings in White Collar Crime. And thank you, everybody. Blessings to everybody and have a good night.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.